The whispering dawn mist lay low over the valley, as if someone had carefully spread the thinnest sheet above the grass, too shy to let it rise. A few indistinct sounds: the rustle of wings, the whisper of water over stones, the far-off call of a shepherd's horn fell into rhythm, like the breathing of a sleeping world. Asya stopped at the edge of the path and listened, her fingers gripping the handles of the basket were 2 apples and a cloth pouch of dried tea. John's wort shifted softly. "Hush," said the dawn. She had always heard its voice in her own way. For some, it was birdsong. For others, just the wind. For Asya, the dawn's whisper always formed into words, barely audible, like a child trying to speak before learning how. And every morning for the past 3 weeks, it had been the same, that strange note trembling at the edge of hearing, and the feeling of eyes on her back. She walked further down the path toward the river. The stones were warm after the night. Surprising, another small break in the usual order of things. Lazavka still slept. White houses nestled in the grass like mushrooms after rain, and only from the smithy on the corner trailed a thread of smoke. Uncle Makar rose earlier than anyone. Asya descended to the water and sat on a fallen log at the bend. The dawn was always clearer here. The river looped around a tiny willow-covered island, and the whisper seemed to come from there. "I hear you," she murmured, as if afraid to scare it away. "But I don't understand." The water answered with rippling shivers, and in the pattern Asya thought she saw something familiar, an image from an old book she had found in her mother's trunk. Circles within circles, jagged lines like star maps. The book had said every place had its own language, and if you listened long enough, you could at least learn its greeting. "Good morning," she exhaled, not in human words, but the way her gut told her to, shaping the sound with pauses and drawn-out tones. It came out strange, thin, almost a whistle, melting into a soft L inside. She felt both amused and frightened. Something answered, not in words, more like a touch, an unseen hand smoothing her hair, then gently urging her toward the island. Asya rose, hesitating before stepping onto the roots that cut into the bank. The old tree loomed like a bent guardian, hiding a narrow, almost invisible crossing only children used. The island smelled of wet bark and fresh milk, the scent coming from somewhere above. Asya looked up. High in the willow's branches hung a small bundle of threads, crudely woven, yet unmistakable. A crow traveler's charm. Adults hung them when they wanted the road to remember their steps and lead them home. But this one was new, the threads still glistening with dew. "Who's here?" Asya asked, and her words fell into silence. The island said nothing. The river said nothing. "Hush," said the dawn. "Step." She stepped, not with her foot, but inside. Like in dreams, when you become a little lighter and taller, and the world shifts just enough to reveal another, laid over it like glass. Shadows lengthened, the willow taller, the water darker, the air denser, and in that density appeared threads, thin, silver strings stretching from stone to stone, stalk to stalk, breath to breath. She had seen them before in rare moments. Her mother called quiet time. "Don't touch," her mother had said. "Only watch. It's not for us. It's for those who remember." But her mother had died last winter, and since then, quiet time had come more often, as if someone had left a door ajar. This time, the threads didn't just tremble, they formed a pattern, and in its center glowed a faint light. Not illumination, just a mark, here. And from it, a thread reached toward Asya. She didn't know what to do. Every nerve whispered, "Run." But the memory of her mother's steady gaze held her. "If you're calling," she said, "I'm coming." The thread touched her fingertips, warm, almost gentle. Then sharp pain, like a nettle burn. She flinched, dropping the basket. Apples rolled into the grass, one plopping into the water. The light in the pattern wavered and grew, now an eye, small as a bird's, but with human watchfulness. "I'm not your enemy," she said quickly, clutching her stung fingers. The pain faded as fast as it had come, leaving a slow tingling. The eye blinked or seemed to, and beneath the water, among the willow roots, she saw a shape. Human, but not quite. Thin, a boy, a girl? The water blurred its lines. It sat curled up, holding something round and black, Around it, the silver threads gathered. Are you stuck? Asya asked. Or hidden? The answer came as an image, cold as ice water, loud as a fairground crowd. She felt trapped, as if inside a stranger's skin. Her heart thudded, breath quickened. She saw night, lanterns, window lights, and above all a heavy toll splitting the air. Faces she knew. Aunt Marfa clutching her cat, Macker with his hammer, the twins Lika and Luca with matching handkerchiefs, all looking up at the hill where the old chapel stood, its windows glowing with something not fire cold and bone white. Is it soon? She asked. No answer, just a growing whisper. She was about to step back when someone called her name. Aloud. Asya. The voice was high, a little hoarse. Asya, where are you? She broke out of quiet time like surfacing from water. Everything ordinary again. Willow River. Luca stood on the bank, a weary boy in an oversized jacket. His curls stuck out, his eyes shone. Here, she called, waving. What is it? Luca hopped over the root, balancing like a tightrope walker, and crossed to her. He saw the basket, picked up an apple, polished it on his sleeve, took a bite. Meeting at the elders, he said through a mouthful. Now, Macker's there. Lika too. 2 herders gone missing in Upper Potty. And last night hear it? The bell rang. Twice. On its own. Can't on its own, Asya said automatically. Glanced at the hill. And they say, he lowered his voice. They say someone found strange tracks by the river, like claws. But with a gear pad, Asya clenched her teeth. Gears? The word chilled her. Her mother had told her about such tracks. The old mechanists called them the iron script. But the iron ones were gone, the grown-up said. Over the pass, and seen for years. Let's go, she said, picking up the basket. But she glanced at the water. The creature was gone, but the silver thread still quivered in the air before fading. Later, the elder's house was crowded, people shoulder to shoulder, smelling of sweat, dried herbs, iron. On the wall hung a faded map. Rivers and roads veined across it. In the center, Lazovka a speck, and around it, notes, old bridge, landslide, Devil's Hollow. The elder, short despite his nickname Oak, chopped the air with his hand. And I say, until we're sure there's no danger, no grazing on the north pasture. He scanned the room. Who'll check it? Need 2 or 3 with their heads on straight. Macker? The smith already stood, arms folded. He nodded. I'll go, but not alone. Luca. The boy perked up, grinning. Not you, runt. I'll take. Lika. She's sharp-eyed. What about me? Asya asked before thinking. I'll go. Heads turned. Someone snorted. Someone whispered. The girl. Macker studied her, then nodded. You'll go, he said. You hear the river. If the tracks are by the water, it'll help. And he paused. You're brave, Asya. Unlike some, made a face of mock outrage. Lika elbowed him. Going too, she said. Period. The elder knocked the table. Settled. You leave in half an hour. Take rope, lanterns, and he grimaced. If the chapel lights again, don't go in. I'll send Father Gavrilo. Let him deal with whatever's playing there. A thread tugged inside Asya, the silver kind. Half an hour enough to check the island again? Enough to learn what had said, come. She slipped out the door as the room filled with voices. Morning had fully taken hold. The sun rolled from behind the mountain like a copper coin. Shadows shortened. The air was clear and ringing as water. Asya ran down to the river, to the willow. The ground seemed to help her. The creature sat where she'd seen it before, but now, the water around it was darker, like ink spilled. It held the black stone and stared at her so intently she felt awkward. She sat on a root, careful to keep her feet dry. I have little time, she said. We're going to see the tracks. If it's tied to you, tell me, or show me. I'll try to understand. It lifted the stone, not a stone, she saw now, but a disc like the ones in the mechanist's books, etched with fine lines and dots, like a star map. It turned the disc, and one dot glowed faintly. Silver threads tightened and formed the same pattern. Here, only now, here, was on the elder's map. Devil's Hollow. Asya nodded. We're going there anyway. The creature nodded, or the water moved. And then another image, quick as a blink. Lika reaching for something shiny on the ground, Luca shouting her name, Macker raising his hammer, and above a sky sliced by thin straight lines, as if clouds had been cut with a knife. Got it, Asia whispered. Careful, she ran back. Her heart pounded, but her breath was steady. By the elder's house, the others were ready, Lika adjusting her pack straps, Luca arguing about rope length, Macker checking the lantern. Let's go, Asia said. And don't touch anything too. Even if it shines. Lika raised a brow, used to Asia's oddities. Fine. If it shines, it's mine, but I won't touch it. They took the north trail. The forest closed in fast, the village's noise fading. The path wound through pines and firs, over hills, across streams. Macker led with a steady pace. The twins whispered about who could sling a stone farther. For 3 days, the valley had been asleep under a skin of silver fog, and it seemed even the stones held their breath. At first light on the 4th morning, the mist began to stir as if moved by the faintest of exhalations. It slid away from the low roofs and the river, revealing the crooked silhouettes of the old maples and the thin, winding lane that led up toward the ruined watchtower. With that clearing came a sound, not a voice, but a suggestion of one, a susurration like leaves reading secrets to one another. The villagers called it the Whispering Dawn. No one else noticed what Mara did. She stood at her threshold with the chipped enamel mug cooling in her hands, listening not with her ears, but with the empty place beneath her ribs where grief had once lived. The whispers tugged at the hem of her memory, a name, half-remembered. Song, child's laugh carried away years ago. It was enough to set her old hunger stirring. Questions she had thought buried were waking, and they wanted answers. She left the mug on the sill and walked toward the lane. The cobbles were cold and damp, the kind that seeped through boots and into the marrow. She welcomed it because the physical ache kept the other, softer aches at bay. As she passed the baker's stall, old Harlan raised his head from a sack of rye and tipped his cap in that slow, deliberate way that said the world moved on, regardless. Mara nodded without looking back. The whispering seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, and as it threaded through the village, the loose ends of people's lives trembled. At the foot of the rise, the watchtower cast a long, crooked shadow that fell over the lane like an accusation. The tower had been empty since before Mara was born, a hollow tooth in the ridge, but lately it had felt less abandoned and more expectant, as though it kept vigil for something due to return. Near its base, an old stone marker stood half swallowed by moss. Someone had once carved a rune there. Time had smoothed most of it away, but this morning the groove took on a thin, luminous edge, like moonlight caught in a hairline crack. Mara placed her palm against the cold stone. The whispering stilled for an instant, then swelled into a clear, single syllable that hummed in her mouth, like a bell. Come. It was not an order, it was a memory remembering itself. When she pulled her hand away, a ribbon of frost followed her fingers, tracing the path she had just taken and melting into the soil as though it had never been. She climbed the path toward the tower, each step lifting her farther from the village and closer to the place where the valley opened into the high moor. The sun, shallow and precise, edged over the eastern crags and set the dew alight. Shadows unraveled. The whispering grew more insistent, weaving around the tufts of heather and the lichen-stained stones. Sometimes Mara thought the sound carried words, names she should have known, small private things that a person only learns in the dark, but whenever she tried to pin them down, they slipped like minnows. Halfway up, she found another sign, a row of tiny stones set upright like teeth, each one marked with a shallow notch. Someone had walked this path in the night and left a tally. The marks were fresh, her pulse sharpened. That tally could mean trespassers or pilgrims, or worse, the sort of people who came looking to trade in old bargains. For years, the valley had been content with its quiet and its poverty. Newcomers meant stories and upheaval. Mara had learned to listen to the wind and the way it carried news. Today, the wind carried salt from the distant sea and a faint tang of iron. It carried something else too, or that, something metallic yet warm, the scent of a bell recently tolled. She swallowed, feeling the memory of other bells. A warning bell, a morning bell, a bell calling people from the fields. The whispering rose like a chorus then, and within it she heard a cadence she recognized from a lullaby her mother had hummed once, the one that had made nightmares small again. The tower's ruined gate, she paused. The wooden lintel sagged. A single iron ring hung loose in the stone like an earring. Beyond, the stair spiraled upward in crumbly half-steps, a dark thread stitched through the tower's belly. Someone had placed a single feather on the lowest step, white, though stained at the tip. Mara reached out and touched it. It was warm. The whispering swelled into a voice so close she could have touched it with her ear. Not all dawns are gentle, it said. Some come to wake what should have slept. Mara did not reply. She had lost words in a winter long ago. The kind one does not get back. Instead she climbed. Each step took her upward through drifting beams of light and shadow, and with each ascent, the valley below narrowed into a map of tiny roofs and chimney smoke. Her breath came steady and precise. The whispering braided itself into a pattern she could follow like a stitch. Left, right, left, pause. When she reached the topmost room, she found the door propped open by a stone carved in the shape of an eye. Inside, the air was neither warm nor cold, but held in that improbable temperature of things kept waiting. The far wall was painted with a mural so faded it could have been a trick of the light, a sun rising over a river, two figures reaching across it. At the center of the floor lay an object draped in cloth, a bundle the size of a child. The whispering fell to a hush, and then, as if the room itself inhaled, the cloth shivered and a small, familiar face blinked up at Mara. It was a face she had dreamed of on and off for years, the face of someone who might have been her sister, or might have been the echo of a promise made the night the village stopped keeping certain kinds of watch. The eyes took her in a slow, assessing look, and in them Mara saw the same hollow she had carried for years mirrored back with a brightness she had forgotten existed. Hello. The voice that came then was not the whispering dawn, but the voice of the person beneath the cloth. It was older, younger, and older again. It smelled faintly of smoke and lemon and something metallic. You heard me. Mara crouched without thinking, the world narrowing to the small living thing before her. The whispering outside softened, like the rustle of pages, and seemed to be waiting for a first word, for a pledge, for whether the valley would keep its secrets or set them free. She found her voice, rough as a used rope. "Who are you?" she asked. The answer came in a smile that held both mischief and gravity. "I am what the morning forgot to forget," the newcomer said, "and I am hungry for the truth." Mara's hand hovered over the newcomer's shoulder before she could stop it, as if touching would prove this was not a dream. The skin was warm beneath her palm, living, real, and it prickled with the faintest trace of salt, like someone who'd been traveling by sea and scrubbed with river water. The face beneath the cloth was narrow and freckled, but the eyes were the striking sort that made a stranger feel remembered, one pale gray, the other the color of old honey. "You're not from the valley," Mara said, the words a small, steadying anchor. She did not know why she expected the person to lie. The valley's liars were clumsy. Truth, there was a thing like a stone, heavy and simple. "Low," the newcomer agreed. "Not by blood, by debt, perhaps." She sat up, unwrapping the cloth with hands that moved impatiently, like someone eager to meet a long-delayed reckoning. Her hair was braided in an odd, asymmetrical pattern, threaded with thin wires that caught the light and made small, secretive sounds like bells, but too small to be heard from below. "But I know the valley's counting. I know what was owed." Mara felt the word debt like a cold coin dropped into her palm. She had an inkling of what the stranger hinted at, the old bargains, the sort kept in the staging of fires and the hush of midnight confessions. The valley paid its dues in more ways than money. Sometimes dues were names, or favors, or the steady turning of a promise. Once, long ago, when people still spoke of the last watch, debts had been recorded in runes and song. The mark at the tower's base, the half-lighted groove, had been one of those records. "You were left," Mara said, the memory of a small bundle on a winter doorstep surfacing unbidden. "Someone put you here. A carving keeps nothing. for itself, the woman said. It remembers what it is told, but it forgets in pieces, and I am the piece that remembers the rest. She tilted her head toward the mural on the wall. You call it the Whispering Dawn. We call it the Remembering. It has started early this year. Mara's throat tightened. The Remembering. Old Harlan had muttered something like that once, when store sacks were lighter than usual, and his hands had trembled a little as he sifted the grain. No one had used the word openly. It belonged to older storytellers, the kind whose eyes grew bright at night, and who warned children not to wander past the marker. If the remembering was early, then the valley's careful balance the ways the people kept their old bargains might be fraying. Why here? Mara asked. Why now? The stranger's laugh was small and quick. Because the valley is tired of forgetting what it promised. Because runes smooth with rain and memories thin with the salt of tears. Because something else came to see if the debt was paid. She tapped the feather on the stair with a finger. A summons arrives delicate as a feather and loud as a bell. It comes to those who listen. And you, what are you? Mara pushed. Fear had a flavor now, sharp and metallic. But beneath it ran a curious, stubborn hope. If this woman, this living memory, could pull the valley's past loose, perhaps the old hole inside Mara could be stitched. Mara's fingers curled tightly around the bell. Its metal was cold but familiar, and the weight of it anchored her to the moment. Outside, the valley lay quiet, but she could feel it leaning toward the tower, holding its breath in anticipation. The whispering dawn had hushed, as if waiting for her decision. Every instinct told her to turn back, to put the bell down and walk away, keep the old silence intact. But something in the seamstress's gaze held her fast, a steady insistence that the truth, once unearthed, could not be ignored. She raised the bell. The tiny silver tongue inside quivered, ready to speak. The valley below seemed to tremble as she brought it to her lips and struck it. The sound was not just a bell's ring, it was a summons, a ripple of light and shadow, a ripple that unthreaded the fog and made the river glitter like a strip of mercury. Immediately, the whispering returned louder, sharper, weaving into a chorus that filled the tower with voices both remembered and half forgotten. Names drifted to her ears like petals on a stream, some sweet, some bitter, some tinged with the ache of loss. Mara felt them brush against the corners of her memory, the brothers she had buried in silence, the friends whose faces had blurred in the folds of time, the villagers who had lived and died without a witness. The seamstress's voice cut through the noise. Do not be afraid. They are not coming to punish. They are coming to be remembered. Mara's heart pounded as she struck the bell again. The sound resonated through the tower, down the path, and across the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a gate creaked. A shutter banged against a wall. And then footsteps. Not one pair, but many, moving with purpose toward the watchtower. Fear rose inside Mara, but beneath it, a strange exhilaration bloomed. The valley was waking, answering the call she had just made. The wind carried the scent of smoke, wet earth, and iron, and she realized it wasn't just the breeze, it was the valley itself breathing, alive and aware. Who are they? She asked the seamstress, though she already knew the answer. Those who were owed, the seamstress said. Those whose names were forgotten, whose debts were hidden, whose stories were silenced. They are coming to the tower to see if the debt is acknowledged, to see if the valley remembers what was promised. Mara tightened her grip on the bell. The weight of the past pressed down on her, but with it came a surge of courage. She had kept secrets, yes, but she had also protected what mattered. Now, the valley demanded reckoning, and she could not turn away. The first figures emerged from the fog, a man in a threadbare coat, his eyes haunted but clear, a woman clutching a bundle of faded letters, children who looked far too small for the burdens they carried. More followed, each with a piece of the valley's story, each drawn to the sound of the bell. Mara rang it again, letting it toll slowly, deliberately. Each strike was a heartbeat, each echo a bridge between the past and the present. The whispering rose into a symphony, voices intertwining with the wind, with the river, with the stones of the tower. The seamstress stood behind her, silent now, letting Mara take the lead. You are the keeper of this dawn, she said softly. You decide what is remembered, and what is let go, Mara closed her eyes. She pictured the brother she had lost, the promises she had made, the debts that had shaped the valley for generations. And she made a choice. The next strike of the bell was louder, clearer, carrying her decision across the valley. The fog lifted like a curtain, and the valley seemed to exhale. The villagers, the remembered, the forgotten all converged on the tower, drawn by the sound, by the reckoning, by the hope that something long buried could finally be set free. Mara opened her eyes and saw them. Faces lined with grief and joy, eyes shining with recognition and relief. She felt a weight lift from her chest. The whispering dawn had spoken, and she had answered. The seamstress smiled, a faint glimmer of pride and mystery in her gaze. "This is only the beginning," she said. "The valley will change, Mara. But now, at least, it remembers." Mara rang the bell one last time, letting its sound linger, a promise and a warning, a key turning in the lock of the valley's past. And as the echoes faded into the morning light, she realized that the dawn would never be quiet again, not for her, not for the valley, not for anyone who had ever been owed a memory. The tower door creaked closed behind them, but the whispering remained, soft and insistent, weaving through every roof, every tree, every stone. And Mara understood at last. She had not just answered the dawn, she had become part of it. The valley breathed differently now. The fog no longer clung like a secret. Instead, it drifted lazily, curling around rooftops and river bends as if hesitant to hide anything. Mara stepped onto the tower's stone balcony and looked down. The villagers were gathered in loose clusters, faces lifted toward the rising sun, whispering in tones that carried both awe and fear. Each of them carried a fragment of the valley's history, some held in memory, some tucked into bundles of letters, some barely acknowledged even by their own hearts. A child ran toward the tower, clutching a small wooden carving of a bird. "I remember," the child shouted. "I remember the stories." Mara's throat tightened. That single word, shouted into the dawn, had the power to unravel years of silence, of carefully hidden grief. From the shadows of the tower's base, the seamstress appeared, moving lightly as if she were part of the wind itself. "The remembering spreads quickly," she said. "It cannot be contained once it finds its first witnesses. Some will embrace it, some will fight it, but all will feel its weight." Mara nodded, still holding the silver bell. Its sound no longer frightened her. It was a tool, a thread connecting the scattered pieces of the valley. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," the seamstress said, "you help them see what was forgotten. You guide them in deciding what to carry forward, and what to leave behind. Some debts can be repaid, some cannot. Some truths will heal, others will hurt. But everything that is remembered becomes part of the valley's soul." Mara looked down at the crowd again. A man with a crooked back carried a faded journal. A woman in a tattered cloak clutched a bundle of dried herbs and bones. Each person brought a piece of the past, a memory, a story, a secret long held. And now, all of it was converging here, at this tower, at the brink of a new day. She raised the bell once more, letting it ring out across the valley. The sound was clearer than ever, cutting through the morning mist like a blade of light. With each toll, the villagers' voices joined hers in a chorus, recounting names, deeds, and promises. The valley itself seemed to hum with the rhythm. A living memory awakened. Suddenly, a ripple ran through the crowd. Mara felt it in her bones, a presence that did not belong to any living villager. From the edge of the river, a figure stepped forward, tall and cloaked in shadow. Its face was hidden, but its movement carried purpose, deliberate and unyielding. The whispering shifted, carrying a warning. This was not part of the remembered, yet it had come to witness, or perhaps to challenge. Mara's grip tightened on the bell. The seamstress moved to her side, whispering, "Not all who come will be friendly. Some debts are older than the valley itself, and some promises were never meant to be broken. Prepare yourself, the dawn brings reckoning as well as revelation." The stranger halted at the river's edge, lifting a hand toward the tower. The mist parted slightly, revealing something glinting, a symbol etched in silver, unfamiliar but undeniably powerful. The villagers murmured, fear and curiosity mingling. Mara could feel the valley's pulse quicken, the ancient rhythm of old bargains and unsettled promises vibrating in the soil beneath their feet. "Who are you?" Mara called, her voice steady despite the knot of tension in her chest. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it raised both hands, and a wave of cold air swept through the crowd, carrying whispers of names Mara had never heard, depths she could not fathom. "I am the balance," the voice finally said, low and echoing. "And I have come to see if the valley remembers all it owes, or if it dares to forget again." Mara swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of the moment press down. The bell in her hand seemed to pulse with anticipation, a tether to both the past and the future. The remembering had begun, but now the dawn demanded more than recollection. It demanded courage, judgment, and the willingness to face what had been buried too long. She turned to the seamstress. "What do we do?" The seamstress smiled, but it was not comforting. "We listen, we guide, and we prepare to face the balance. The valley has awakened, and now it must answer for every promise ever made." Mara lifted the bell, feeling its weight as both a weapon and a key. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of whispered names, some familiar, some unknown. And in that moment, Mara understood that the valley's fate, and perhaps her own, would be decided before the sun had fully risen. The first strike of the bell rang out. Mara struck the bell again, letting its tone stretch across the valley like a living thread. The figure at the river's edge flinched at the sound, though it did not retreat. Instead, it lifted its head, and Mara caught a glimpse of its eyes. One silver, one dark as midnight, and felt the weight of centuries in their gaze. The villagers whispered nervously, clustering closer to the tower. Some clutched letters and trinkets, others gripped hands tightly, as if the simple act of touch could anchor them to the present and protect them from the unknown. Mara felt their fear, their hope, their buried memories pressing against her chest, mingling with her own. "You call yourself Balance," Mara said, her voice steady though her fingers ached from holding the bell. "What do you want from us?" The figure stepped forward, and the air chilled with its movement. "I am the Reckoning," it said, voice low and resonant, carrying like a drumbeat through the mist. "I am what comes when promises are hidden, when debts are deferred, when names are forgotten. The valley has called the remembering now. It must face what it owes." A hush fell over the villagers. Mara felt the bell's vibration pulse through her arm, and instinctively she rang it again. The sound was sharper now, deliberate, as if slicing through the veil between past and present. Whispers rose from the crowd, old names, long-buried stories, memories of joy and sorrow, weaving together into a chorus that seemed almost tangible, forming threads that reached the figure at the river. The Reckoning raised one hand, and the whispers faltered, quivering like fragile glass. "You awaken what was hidden," it said. "You summon what was denied. But are you ready to face the cost?" Mara's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed caution, yet beneath it surged determination. "We are ready," she said, louder than she felt. "The valley will answer. We will remember what must be remembered." The figure studied her, then nodded slowly. "Then, let the debts be known. Let the promises be called. Let the past speak its truth. And let the valley decide what to carry forward." From the crowd, villagers began stepping forward one by one, holding out objects, letters, carvings, and tokens, pieces of memory, fragments of the past. Each offering pulsed with quiet power, and as they presented them, the Reckoning touched each item in turn. A shimmer ran along its fingertips, and Mara felt the valley's heartbeat quicken, as if the land itself recognized the act of remembrance. Mara struck the bell again, steady and strong. The sound mingled with the voices, the offerings, the wind, and the mist. Slowly, the Reckoning began to change, the shadowed figure growing less ominous, more human in form. It was still powerful, still awe-inspiring, but now, it seemed to respond to the collective will of the valley, bending slightly toward the light of memory. "Do you see?" the seamstress whispered. "The valley is alive. It is not a passive witness. Every choice, every recollection, every acknowledgement shapes what comes next." Mara nodded, her heart pounding. She could see it now, The valley's fate was no longer dictated by silence or fear. It was held in the act of remembering, in the courage to face old debts, and in the willingness to let the past be known, fully and honestly. The reckoning spoke. Again, softer this time. The debts are acknowledged. The promises are remembered. The valley's balance is restored for now. But remember, Mara, what is remembered must also be honored. You cannot simply call the past and walk away. You are bound to it, as are they all. Mara looked at the villagers, their faces a mixture of relief and awe. She felt the weight of the bell in her hands, now less a burden and more a guide. The whispering dawn had not ended. It had only begun, and she understood that the true work, the living, breathing act of remembering, reconciling, and honoring was just beginning. The reckoning slowly retreated, fading into the mist, leaving only the glimmer of its presence in the river's reflection. The villagers exhaled, and the valley seemed to settle, as if it had taken a long, necessary breath. Mara lowered the bell, her fingers trembling but steady. The seamstress placed a hand on her shoulder. You have done what few could. You have answered the dawn. But remember this, the valley will always call for witnesses, for guardians of memory. The work never truly ends. Mara nodded, looking out over the valley. She felt the weight of responsibility. Yes, but also the spark of hope. The dawn had whispered its secrets, and she had answered. Now, it was time for the valley to remember, for the debts to shape the future, and for new stories to grow from the soil of the old. And somewhere in the mist, a new bell unseen, unheard began to toll, echoing the rhythm of the whispering dawn. Mara lowered the bell, but the valley did not quiet. The mist curled around the river and the trees like a living thing, carrying the faint echoes of every name that had been called. The villagers lingered near the tower, hesitant to move, as if stepping away would undo the work they had just begun. One by one, they began to speak aloud, sharing the memories that had once been buried. A man recalled a lost sister who had vanished during the winter of famine. A woman told of promises made to a neighbor who had died in silence. Each story, each recollection, carried a weight, yet it also brought relief. Mara realized that remembering was not only an act of acknowledgement, but a balm for the wounds of the valley. The seamstress moved among them quietly, listening, nodding, and offering gentle encouragement. Do not fear the past, she whispered to those whose voices trembled. It only demands truth. It does not punish those who speak honestly. Mara felt the bell's vibration linger in her hands, like a heartbeat she could not ignore. The valley seemed to pulse beneath her feet, the soil and stone humming with the resonance of memory. She understood now that the tower was more than a place of watch. It was a conduit, a bridge between what had been forgotten and what must now be remembered. Suddenly, a sharp cry broke through the murmurs. A boy, no more than 10, pointed toward the forest's edge. Something's coming, he shouted. The villagers turned, fear flashing across their faces. Through the thinning mist, Mara saw movement, a figure, small but deliberate, moving toward the clearing, carrying something wrapped in cloth. The seamstress's eyes narrowed. Not all debts are accounted for, she said. Some answers come from beyond the valley, and some demands cannot be ignored. Mara gripped the bell tighter. Its sound was no longer a simple call. It was a shield, a signal, a challenge. She took a step forward onto the balcony, letting the villagers see her resolve. Let it come, she said. The valley remembers, and we will face whatever arrives together. The figure stepped into the light, and Mara saw what it carried. A bundle of twisted branches, bones, and fragments of old letters. The air grew heavier, tinged with the scent of smoke and iron. The villagers drew closer, murmuring in fear and awe, while Mara felt the bell pulse in response, almost as if it recognized the weight of what was being offered. The seamstress placed a hand on Mara's shoulder. This is the first test, she said softly. The valley will reveal its secrets in ways you cannot yet predict. You must listen carefully, and remember always, what is hidden will seek to be known. Mara nodded, raising the bell once more. The mist swirled around her, carrying the voices of the remembered and the whispers of the forgotten. She struck it firmly, letting the clear ringing note carry across the valley. The figure halted, the bundle trembling in its grasp. The air seemed to thrum with anticipation, and Mara understood the first stage of the remembering had truly begun. The wind carried whispers of the world that used to be, sifting through the skeletons of cities like a ghost combing through forgotten hair. Mara stepped over the cracked pavement, each footfall a question: who survives when tomorrow burns before it even arrives? In the distance, a tower of ash spiraled into the sky, a mute sermon to ambition swallowed by its own fire. She remembered her grandmother's words, half warning, half riddle: a candle that refuses to bend will burn the house down, but the one that bends learns the shape of the flame. Mara's hand brushed the charred remnants of a playground. Swing! The metal groaned like the world itself, tired and aching, yet stubbornly upright. She thought about choices, how they fall like seeds in fertile dust, waiting for wind, waiting for fire. Some grow into trees, others are just smoke. A figure emerged from the haze, silhouette etched in orange twilight. It moved like a memory, quiet but insistent, a living contradiction of hope and ruin. Mara's heart tightened. The world had taught her to fear the living, yet this shadow seemed more human than the ashes around them. "You're chasing yesterday's ghosts," the figure said, voice both tender and cruel. "But tomorrow isn't afraid of you." Mara hesitated, watching the figure's shadow stretch and sway across the rubble. Every instinct screamed to run, yet something in the cadence of that voice pulled her forward, like a moth circling a distant, dying flame. "You don't see it, do you?" the figure murmured, stepping closer. The light caught the curve of a scar along their jaw, ancient, deliberate, a roadmap of survival. The fire that destroyed the world, it was never the world's. It was inside us all along. Mara felt the words coil around her chest, squeezing, then releasing. She thought of the small choices she'd made, turning away from strangers, letting fear dictate her path, closing doors she might never open again. Each was a spark, each a whisper. Of the ashes she now walked through, the figure raised a hand. In it hovered a shard of mirror, fractured and glowing faintly, as if it had trapped the last breath of sunlight. "Look," they said. "See yourself not as you are, but as what you could burn into being." Mara stared, and the reflection was wrong. Her eyes were the same, but her hands bore scars she didn't have. Her mouth opened in the mirror, whispering things she hadn't thought yet. And in that moment, she realized the truth of the riddle her grandmother had told her. The candle that bends is the one that survives the wind, but the one that dares to burn its own shape becomes the flame the world remembers. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and ash, and with it, a single thought: survival wasn't enough. To rise, she would have to become fire. Mara moved through the ruins, guided by instinct rather than memory. Every building she passed leaned into itself like tired old men. Every shattered window a pair of staring eyes, watching. Her heart beat, a rhythm that matched the pulse of the city, a quiet drum in the chest of a sleeping giant. She came to a plaza, half buried in ash, where statues once stood. One figure remained upright, its face eroded but still resolute. Mara traced her fingers over the weathered stone. She felt a connection, a silent understanding. Even in ruin, something could endure. Even in silence, something could speak. The figure with the mirror approached her again. "You see," they said, "people cling to the past because it's safe. Safe is quiet. Safe is numb. But quiet doesn't rebuild cities. Numbness doesn't forge tomorrow." Mara swallowed. "Then what do I do?" she asked, voice trembling, yet carrying a strange defiance. "You walk," the figure said simply, "and you leave pieces of yourself in every step. Some pieces will burn, some will bloom, but each step is yours, and each step shapes the world that comes after." She took a deep breath, feeling the ash swirl around her like smoke in a ritual. Each inhale tasted of loss. Each exhale carried possibility. Mara understood then that the world was not waiting for heroes, nor for salvation. The world was waiting for people brave enough to carry sparks and not let them die in their hands. The tower of ash loomed closer now, its shadow stretching across the plaza like a dark promise. Mara clenched her fists. If tomorrow wants fire, then I will give it a flame it cannot forget. The figure handed her the mirror shard. See yourself, they said. Not as the girl who survived, but as the one who chooses. Only then will tomorrow bend to your shape. Mara looked into the mirror, and this time, she did not flinch. Her reflection shifted, no longer fractured. She was whole, scars, smoke, hope, and fire all burning together, and with that, she stepped forward into the ashes, into the wind, into tomorrow. The tower pulsed. The ground trembled, and Mara finally unafraid smiled. The wind howled louder as Mara moved toward the tower of ash. Its surface shimmered unnaturally, like the heat of a flame frozen in air. Every step she took seemed to echo through the ruins, a heartbeat against the silence of a city long dead. The figure with the mirror stayed behind, their voice drifting through the smoke. Remember, they said, the world tests those who dare to rise. Every shadow will speak, every echo will lie. Only the flame that knows its own shape can withstand the trial. Mara's eyes caught movement in the shadows, a figure, or perhaps several, shifting between the remnants of collapsed walls. At first, she thought they were ghosts, remnants of lives lost. But as she drew closer, she realized the shapes mirrored her own fears, the choices she had avoided, the failures she had buried, the moments she had allowed to burn without resistance. They moved like smoke, twisting and whispering. You are not ready, they hissed in voices she recognized as her own. You are nothing but ashes. Mara's breath came hard. She raised the mirror shard, and the reflection glowed brighter. The shadows recoiled. In that moment, she understood the parable her grandmother had once whispered. Only by staring at the darkness within can one shape the fire without. Step by step, she pressed forward. Each shadow she confronted either dissolved into smoke or turned into a figure she recognized herself, yet stronger, braver and afraid. She felt the heat in her chest growing, a flame that was hers and hers alone. At the base of the tower, the air pulsed with energy, heavy and alive. The ash under her feet swirled upward as if the world itself was breathing, waiting. Mara hesitated. The tower wasn't just a structure, it was a test. And the figure in the mirror's words echoed, only the flame that knows its own shape can withstand the trial. She lifted the shard high. The fractured glass shimmered, catching the dying sunlight. The tower shivered, and from within, a door appeared made entirely of light and smoke, demanding she step through. Mara took a deep breath. If survival was enough, I would have stopped long ago. But I am more than that. I am the fire that refuses to die. She stepped forward. The door swallowed her, and the world shifted. Shadows became solid, whispers became voices, and the ashes beneath her feet turned to molten paths of gold and red. The tower was alive, a breathing entity testing every fragment of her soul. She ran, not from fear, but toward the challenge, each step a declaration. She would not be a remnant of the past, she would be the architect of tomorrow. And in the molten light, Mara glimpsed what awaited, a mirror of the future, shimmering and uncertain. It was not promise, nor threat, it was choice. And for the first time, she realized the truth. Tomorrow is not given, it is forged. The moment Mara's foot crossed the threshold, the world shifted completely. Light and shadow danced like living entities, wrapping around her like a cloak. The floor beneath her rippled, not solid, but molten hot enough to make her heart pound, yet yielding under her weight. Every step felt like a choice, every motion a test of courage. Then the shadows emerged, more real now. They were no longer distant whispers. They took the form of people she had known and lost, friends, strangers, enemies. Their faces were twisted, expressions alternately pleading and accusing. You left us, they hissed, voices overlapping into a single, grinding chorus. You walked away. You chose yourself over all of us. Mara faltered, the shard of mirror slipping in her hand. Her reflection fractured in its surface, 1,000 tiny shards revealing countless versions of herself. The fearful girl, the angry girl, the brave girl who had yet to exist. You are more than your failures, The figure's voice echoed in her mind, the one who had given her the mirror. The flame survives because it does not forget its heat, even in the coldest ash. She clenched the shard tightly, focusing on the warm pulse in her chest. The shadows recoiled slightly, but they did not vanish. Mara realized this was not about defeating them. It was about acknowledgement, seeing them, understanding them, and moving forward despite them. I remember you, she said softly. I see you, and I carry you with me, but I am not only you. I am also me. The shadows hesitated. Their voices softened, and for a moment, Mara glimpsed something like understanding in their eyes. Then the floor shifted again, molten paths, twisting into staircases spiraling upward, toward the heart of the tower. Each step was heavier than the last, as though gravity itself tested her resolve. Sweat mixed with ash on her skin, and yet she climbed, the mirror shard glowing brighter with every step. The higher she ascended, the more she realized the tower was not just a structure of stone and smoke, it was a reflection of herself. Every trial, every shadow, every flicker of flame she faced was a fragment of her own spirit, calling her to understand her shape and claim her fire. At last, she reached a landing where the tower opened into a vast chamber. The walls pulsed like living tissue, breathing with molten light, and in the center, a pool of reflective liquid shimmered. Mara approached, peering in, and gasped. It was not just her reflection. It was her potential, a vision of who she could become. Strong, unbroken, fearless, yet tempered by understanding and memory. The shards of her past, the failures, the losses, the betrayals, they floated around her in the pool like embers. And she realized the truth. The tower did not demand perfection. It demanded acceptance, courage, and the willingness to burn fully into one's own shape. Mara raised the mirror shard above the pool. Light and molten reflection converged, and, for the first time, she felt the warmth of her own flame, steady, alive, unafraid. The tower pulsed, the shadows vanished, and the path forward opened. A staircase spiraling into the heart of the ash tower, leading toward the unknown, toward the tomorrow she would forge herself. She stepped forward, heart blazing, and the tower seemed to breathe with her, acknowledging her as both survivor and architect of what was to come. The staircase spiraled endlessly, yet Mara climbed without hesitation. The molten glow beneath her feet seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, each step resonating like a drum, summoning courage from the very marrow of her bones. The higher she rose, the more the air thickened with heat and memory. Whispers of the past swirled around her, voices of those she had lost, moments she had feared, opportunities she had abandoned. At the apex, the tower opened into a vast chamber, its walls entirely composed of shifting ash and fire. In the center, suspended above a chasm of molten light, floated a single sphere, a perfect orb of liquid flame, radiating both warmth and threat. Mara knew instantly this was the heart of the tower, the crucible of her trial. A voice echoed, neither inside nor outside, but inside her very bones. All that you carry, all that you fear, all that you are, converge here. Will you take the flame, knowing it will consume and transform you? Mara's reflection appeared in the orb, not her present self, but every possibility, the timid child who had hidden, the fighter who had survived, the woman she could become if she embraced the fire fully. The orb shimmered, rippling with the choices she had yet to make, each one a path she could walk or let burn to ash. She hesitated, feeling the weight of every decision pressing against her chest. Fear whispered, "You are not ready. You will be destroyed." Yet beneath it, a deeper, steadier voice answered, "You are fire. You always were." Mara reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the surface of the orb, it exploded in a radiant shockwave. Pain and warmth tore through her, memories and possibilities intertwining, each moment of regret and triumph igniting in brilliant light. The molten floor beneath her turned solid, the walls of ash collapsing into glowing embers that floated upward like a million tiny suns. Her reflection shattered, then reformed, not fractured, not uncertain, but whole. Every shadow she had feared, every piece of herself she had hidden, became part of her flame. She was not just survivor, not just witness. She was architect, she was fire, she was tomorrow itself. The orb pulsed once more, then dissolved into sparks that swirled around her like a crown of light. The tower, sensing her triumph, began to transform. The ash became stone, the smoke became air, the molten glow became sunrise. Mara stood at the apex, looking down over a city of possibilities, a world waiting to be reborn. The figure with the mirror appeared beside her, silent, watching. Mara turned. "I understand now," she said. "The flame is not just inside me, it is me. And tomorrow? Tomorrow is mine to shape." The figure nodded, fading into the rising light. The tower no longer demanded trial. It had granted awakening. Mara looked outward, past the ruins, past the shadows, and for the first time in her life, she saw the horizon not as a threat, but as an invitation. And with that, she stepped forward, into the rising dawn, carrying the fire that would shape the ashes of tomorrow. The sun had barely begun to rise when Mara finally descended from the apex of the tower. The city below was still shrouded in ash, but now, for the first time, it looked alive, like a sleeping giant awakening from a long nightmare. Each shattered street, each crumbling building seemed to pulse with possibility, reflecting the fire that burned within her. Her hands were scorched, her clothes singed, yet the pain was nothing compared to the weight that had lifted from her chest. The tower behind her, once a looming monolith of trial, now appeared smaller, tamed, as if it recognized its purpose had been fulfilled. Mara walked slowly through the streets, the shards of the mirror still warm in her palm. Every step was deliberate, each one leaving a faint glow on the cracked pavement, a mark that the world had been touched, that she had been changed. She realized that survival alone was no longer enough. The true challenge was to shape, to rebuild, to bring meaning where there had been only ash. A distant sound caught her attention, a faint murmur, almost like a chorus of voices. She paused. From the smoke and ruin, figures emerged, not shadows this time, but people, survivors like herself. They looked at her with a mixture of awe, fear, and hope. Mara understood then that the flame she carried was contagious. It could ignite others, not by force, but by example. One of them stepped forward, a young woman with dirt-streaked hair and wide, cautious eyes. You came back," she said, voice trembling. We thought it was over." Mara smiled faintly, feeling the heat of her fire steady within. "It's never over," she said. "Not while we can rise from the ashes. Not while tomorrow waits." The survivors nodded, hesitant yet emboldened. Mara realized that this was the beginning, not the end. The tower had tested her, the flame had claimed her, but the world beyond still demanded courage, creativity, and resilience. And she was ready. As she led them through the ash-laden streets, Mara glanced back at the tower one last time. It stood silent now, a monument to trial and transformation, a reminder that the fires we endure shape the paths we take, and the ashes we walk through are never truly empty, they hold the seeds of tomorrow. And Mara, carrying her fire, understood at last, to walk through the ashes was not enough. To rise, to guide, to ignite hope, that was the true flame. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and possibility. Mara lifted her chin, letting the light of the rising sun touch her face. The journey ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and uncharted, but for the first time, she welcomed it. The ashes of yesterday had become the fire of tomorrow, and she was ready to shape it. The forest thickened as Prometheus moved deeper, each step muffled by layers of fallen petals. The storm's fury had passed, but the trees still trembled, shedding leaves like sighs. Light filtered through the gaps in the canopy, fractured and silver, painting the ground with trembling patterns. Somewhere in the distance, a river groaned under the weight of rain, carrying branches and blossoms downstream, as if it too remembered the storm's wrath. Prometheus paused at a clearing, the air heavy with the scent of wet petals and iron. Here, the storm had been strongest. Trees had splintered, their trunks scarred by lightning. Yet among the destruction, tiny shoots pushed up from the soil, fragile and insistent. Life refused to surrender. Prometheus crouched to touch one. Its stem burned with a faint heat, like A spark from the hearth of creation itself. A gift, even in ruin, he murmured. The words were not for the plants but for himself. The gift he carried had always been double-edged. He remembered the eyes that had looked at him with awe and fear, the way mortals had trembled when fire leapt into their hands, when knowledge lit up their minds. And he remembered the chains, the torment, the endless punishment for daring to steal what was not meant to be taken. From the edge of the clearing, movement caught his attention. A figure emerged, cloaked in tattered gray, carrying a bundle wrapped in storm-soaked cloth. The figure hesitated as Prometheus approached, but there was no fear in their eyes, only recognition. "You walk where the storm still bleeds," the figure said, voice low but steady. "Why bring fire to petals that will burn in your wake?" Prometheus studied them. There was a strange defiance in their posture, a mirrored echo of his own rebellion. "Because even petals deserve warmth," he replied. "Even storms must leave something behind." The figure shifted the bundle. Rain had soaked the cloth, and beneath it, Prometheus could see the faint glow of something alive. Petals? No, the shape was human, small, curled against the cold, yet breathing. A child, perhaps, abandoned in the storm, left to die among the fallen leaves. Prometheus knelt, careful not to startle. The child's eyes fluttered open, dark and wary, and he felt the familiar spark, the quiet fire of survival, the same defiance he had seen in every living thing he had ever touched. "You will not burn," he said, more to himself than to the child. "Not while I still walk." The storm, long gone, whispered through the trees, carrying seeds, petals, and ash. Prometheus rose, lifting the child into his arms. Around him, the forest seemed to bend, leaves curling toward the light of the lingering sparks in his palms. The petals swirled like a miniature storm, wrapping them both in fragile, burning beauty. And somewhere above, in the darkened sky, Prometheus felt the old hunger stir, the hunger for fire, for defiance, for the knowledge that some gifts were worth the cost, no matter how heavy the chains might be. He stepped forward, deeper into the forest, carrying life amid ruin, fire among petals, and the storm still thrumming in his chest. The forest began to thin, giving way to jagged cliffs that overlooked a river of molten rock, winding like liquid fire through the valley below. Prometheus carried the child with ease, but his eyes were drawn to the jagged stones, where small petals clung to cracks as though defying gravity and logic itself. The storm may have passed, but the world was far from tamed. "You're afraid," Prometheus said quietly, glancing down at the child. The small figure hugged him closer, shivering despite the warmth radiating from his own fire. "You don't know it yet, but storms aren't only outside. They live here too." He tapped his chest lightly. "And fire is the only way to meet them without being swallowed." The child's dark eyes blinked slowly, absorbing his words, absorbing the rhythm of Prometheus' heartbeat. Here, among petals and embers, something began to stir, a spark that neither storm nor fear could extinguish. They walked in silence for hours, the air growing warmer as they descended the cliffs. Prometheus' steps were measured, aware that the molten river below could both give and take life. Every few moments, he lowered the child to the ground, letting them touch the petals clinging to stone, letting them feel the resilience in fragile things. "You see," he said, "even the weakest can endure. Even the smallest flame can ignite a storm." A sudden crack echoed through the valley. Prometheus froze. Above, the sky churned again, not with rain this time, but with something heavier, darker. Shadows stretched across the molten river, twisting into forms that seemed almost human. Figures, cloaked in darkness, rose from the jagged rocks, carrying torches that burned with unnatural fire. "They've come for me," Prometheus said, his voice steady though the air thickened with tension. "And they will come for you if you show fear." The child tightened their grip, but Prometheus felt no panic in their eyes, only curiosity. This was the moment where fire would be tested, where petals and sparks would either survive or be consumed. He knelt, placing both hands on the child's shoulders. "Listen," he whispered. "The fire I carry is not just mine. It can burn, yes, but it can also protect. You must learn it. Slowly, carefully, but you must." Are you ready?" The child nodded, almost imperceptibly, and Prometheus felt the faint pulse of life in them flare, bright and determined. A spark that had been sleeping was now awake. The figures on the cliffs advanced, torches held high. Their shadows fell like predators across the molten river. Prometheus rose, lifting the child so they could see the storm above the swirling clouds, the distant flashes of lightning, the remnants of petals dancing on the wind. "Then we meet the storm together," he said, and stepped forward. The molten river glowed brighter beneath their feet, petals swirling like sparks in the heat, and the wind itself seemed to hum with anticipation. In that moment, Prometheus realized something profound. Storms could not destroy everything, and fire could not only burn, it could awaken, protect, and even teach. The path ahead was perilous, but the child's spark and the defiance in the petals were proof that even amid ruin, beauty and rebellion would endure. And so, with the storm gathering above and the shadowed figures closing in, Prometheus and the child walked forward, carrying fire and petals into the heart of what could very well be the world's final storm. The shadowed figures paused at the edge of the molten river, their torches flickering against the smoke rising from the rocks. They were not human. Prometheus realized they were embodiments of the storm's fury, the judgment he had long sought to defy. Their eyes glowed like embers, burning not with curiosity but with accusation. Prometheus tightened his grip on the child. "Stay close," he whispered, feeling the fire within himself pulse brighter in response to the threat. "Remember, fire is not only heat. Fire is courage. Fire is defiance." One of the figures stepped forward, raising its torch. A wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of ash and rain. Petals swirled violently, lifted by unseen currents, circling Prometheus and the child like a protective barrier. The child's small hands tightened around his arm, but Prometheus sensed something else, the faint warmth of a spark awakening in them. "Do you think you can teach them?" one figure asked, voice like cracking ice. "They are fragile. They cannot survive the storm you cannot even control." Prometheus' lips curved into a small, wry smile. "Fragile," he echoed. "Petals survive storms. Seeds survive fire. And children, they survive those who think they are powerless." The child's spark flared suddenly, a tiny, trembling light in their chest. Prometheus felt it like a second heartbeat, a resonance of the fire he had carried for centuries. The petals around them seemed to respond, glowing faintly, drifting toward the child as if drawn by this new flame. "You see," Prometheus said softly, "even the smallest spark can bend the storm." The shadowed figures advanced. Their torches now blazed like miniature suns, illuminating the molten river below. Prometheus raised his hands, letting the fire within him rise, weaving it into a shield that wrapped around both of them. The petals lifted higher, whirling in a protective spiral. Sparks leapt from Prometheus' palms, striking the river and sending molten fragments flying like stars. The child mirrored him instinctively. A single hand rose, and from their chest a pulse of warmth radiated outward, feeding the petals, feeding the fire. Prometheus felt a thrill. They were not only learning, they were awakening. The figures recoiled, hissing as if scalded by the combination of fire and defiance. "Impossible," one whispered. "They should not have survived." Prometheus' voice rang clear over the crackle of flames and the roar of molten rock. "Nothing that deserves to live can truly be destroyed. Not by storms, not by fire, by fear." The child's spark flared again, larger this time, and the petals burst into brilliant, glowing fragments, surrounding the pair like a storm of light and fire. The shadowed figures faltered, then scattered, dissolving into smoke and ash, leaving only the echo of their accusation behind. Prometheus lowered his hands, letting the fire settle into his palms. The child blinked at the glowing petals, awe and wonder lighting their face. "You did it," he said, voice quiet but filled with pride. "You survived your first storm." The child smiled, small and hesitant, but real. And for the first time, Prometheus allowed himself a rare thought. that the storm might not always be a curse, and that the fire he carried could ignite not only destruction but life, courage, and hope. The orchard stretched like a dark sea, each twisted tree a silent sentinel. Mist clung to the gnarled trunks and pulled in the hollows, swallowing her footsteps and leaving only the faintest whispers behind. Elara gripped her lantern tighter, the tiny flame trembling as if it sensed the danger before she did. Everywhere she looked, shadows moved just beyond the edges of her vision. A branch shivered as if breathing. A rustle sounded to her left, then right, but when she turned, nothing. The orchard seemed to watch, patient and eternal, waiting for her to falter. She remembered the stories told in hushed tones, of travelers who vanished among these trees, of voices calling from nowhere, of the fruit that carried the taste of memory itself. They said knowledge had a price, and those who took it found themselves trapped in the orchard's embrace, unable to leave. Her heart pounded as she pressed forward. The fire she carried, the forbidden flame she had stolen, seemed heavier now, a weight pressing against her chest. She could almost feel it pulse, alive, eager, demanding release. Like Prometheus, she had taken something that was never meant for her hands. A sudden gust swept through the branches, carrying with it a low, melodic whisper. It wasn't words she could understand, yet it stirred memories she didn't know she had. Faces, voices, fragments of dreams. The lantern flickered violently, casting the orchard into a dance of grotesque shadows. Then she saw it, a figure standing between the trunks, barely more than a silhouette. It did not move toward her, but the weight of its gaze pressed down, heavy and cold. She felt her pulse in her throat. "You shouldn't have come," the voice rasped, almost part of the wind itself. Elara took a slow step forward. "I need to know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I need to see what's hidden here." The orchard seemed to lean closer, branches twisting, shadows stretching. A low hum began to fill the air, vibrating in her bones. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet curiosity flared hotter than fear. Ahead, in the deepest heart of the orchard, something moved. Something ancient, something waiting, and tonight, the orchard would either reveal its secret or consume her whole. Elara's lantern flickered again, throwing the tree's twisted forms into frantic motion. Every shadow seemed to stretch, reaching toward her like grasping fingers. She swallowed, forcing herself to step forward. The path narrowed, roots curling up like the coils of a sleeping serpent, threatening to trip her with every careful step. A strange scent hung in the air, sweet, metallic, and oddly familiar. It made her stomach churn. She realized it was the same scent as the fruit she had once tasted in her dreams, fruit she hadn't known existed outside of her mind. Her pulse quickened. Dreams and reality were bleeding together, and she didn't know which path would lead her out or deeper in. From somewhere far ahead came the soft sound of footsteps, but they weren't hers. They were lighter, almost floating, careful and deliberate. Her heart seized. She strained her ears. The sound stopped abruptly, as if whatever had made it had vanished into thin air. Then a voice echoed, not the one she had heard before, rasping and near, but distant, melodic, almost pleading. "Elara, don't touch it, don't take it." Her breath caught. The name was hers. How could it know? She shook her head, trying to silence the fear clawing at her mind, but the orchard seemed to pulse around her, as if listening to her thoughts. The trees grew closer now, trunks thick and knotted, branches tangled overhead, forming a roof that blocked out the pale light of the moon. Her lantern illuminated glimpses of strange carvings in the bark, symbols she didn't recognize, spirals and triangles, and shapes that seemed to writhe when she looked at them too long. She ran her fingers over one, and it felt warm, alive, like the tree itself was breathing under her touch. A sudden rustle behind her made her whirl around. The mist had thickened, curling around her ankles, rising toward her knees. A figure emerged, tall, impossibly thin, shrouded in shadow. Its eyes glinted like molten gold, reflecting the lantern's flame. It did not speak, but she felt its gaze pierce her chest, searching, judging. "You have the fire," it whispered at last, its voice both everywhere and nowhere. "Do you understand what you carry?" Elara's lips trembled. I think I do, but I need to know more." the figure raised a hand, long fingers curling like the orchard's branches. Curiosity burns brighter than the fire itself. But the orchard remembers, and it always collects its due. The ground beneath her seemed to shift, roots writhing like snakes. The lantern's light wavered, and in the shadows she thought she saw figures, dozens of them watching silently. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of warning and temptation, tugging at the edges of her mind. A step forward, and a branch lashed out, narrowly missing her. She stumbled, catching herself against the rough bark of a tree, and realized the orchard itself was moving now, shifting subtly, guiding her or trapping her. Somewhere ahead, deep in the heart of the orchard, a soft glow pulsed. It was faint, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Her curiosity flared. Every instinct screamed danger, yet she could not turn back. The stolen fire in her pocket seemed to vibrate, as if eager to meet its origin. Elara took a deep breath and stepped toward the glow. The mist parted, revealing a clearing she had never seen before. In the center, a tree unlike any other stood, black as obsidian, its branches heavy with fruit that shimmered like liquid gold. A low hum emanated from it, resonating through the ground, through her bones. She reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the bark, the orchard exhaled. Shadows surged forward, shapes coalescing into forms, faces twisted in agony and wonder. Some screaming silently, others laughing. The tree pulsed again, and the stolen fire in her pocket flared, illuminating a path of light straight into the darkness that awaited her. And then she heard it, the single, undeniable truth of the orchard, whispered on the wind. Once you take what is not yours, there is no turning back. Elara's hand hovered over the fruit. Her pulse pounded like a drum. Every story she had heard, every warning she had ignored, now converged in this single moment. She knew that whatever happened next would change everything: her life, the orchard, perhaps even the world beyond the trees. With trembling fingers, she reached. Elara's fingers brushed the fruit, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the orchard exhaled. The wind whipped through the twisted branches, carrying 1,000 whispers, voices overlapping, urgent and pleading, some angry, some sorrowful. The mist surged like waves, wrapping around her legs, pulling at her balance. The tree pulsed, golden fruit glowing brighter with each beat, and the fire in her pocket leapt as if alive, almost screaming to escape. Her lantern flickered violently, then shattered, sending shards of light scattering across the clearing. Shadows danced wildly, twisting into grotesque shapes, as if the orchard itself were alive and breathing. A voice roared from everywhere and nowhere at once. You were warned. Elara stumbled back, clutching the fire. Shapes emerged from the mist, figures of lost travelers, their faces twisted in agony, reaching for her silently. The golden glow of the fruit reflected in their eyes, making them look like specters of flame. They drifted closer, silent but intent, circling her like predators. The fire pulsed harder in her hand, burning but not consuming. She realized it wasn't just a flame, it was knowledge, power, a force the orchard had tried to guard for centuries. And now, it wanted her to understand its price. A sudden gust tore through the clearing, snapping branches and throwing her to the ground. The obsidian tree shivered, and the fruit quivered as if breathing. From deep within its trunk, a crack appeared, thin at first, then widening, revealing a hollow space filled with golden light, almost unbearable in its brilliance. Elara's curiosity burned hotter than her fear. She crawled forward, ignoring the spectral figures reaching for her, ignoring the mist curling around her throat. She could feel the orchard pressing in from all sides, alive, sentient, demanding she either prove herself or perish. Then she saw it, within the glowing hollow, a symbol etched into the bark, ancient, spiraling, unmistakably alive. It pulsed with every beat of her heart. She knew, without understanding why, that this symbol was the source of the orchard's power, the secret everyone had tried to guard or steal. Her hand hovered over it, trembling. And then, the orchard shifted violently. The spectral figures screamed not with sound, but with the force that rattled her bones. Branches lashed out like serpents, roots surged from the ground, and the mist became a living entity, coiling around her body. Elara's breath caught. She realized she had reached the point of no return. She could grasp the knowledge and face the consequences, or step back and leave, forever haunted by what she had nearly touched. The moment her fingers closed around the golden fruit, the orchard erupted. Shadows twisted violently, roots slamming into the ground like fists, and the mist churned into a thick, writhing storm. The spectral figures, lost travelers, guardians, victims of curiosity, screamed in silent torment, their faces pressed against the veil of reality, reaching toward her as if begging her to stop. The fruit pulsed in her hand, hotter than fire, yet alive with something far stranger: knowledge. Memories and visions cascaded through her mind in a torrent she couldn't control. Faces she had never seen, voices she had never heard, events that had not yet happened. The orchard's history, every secret, every betrayal, every stolen spark of forbidden knowledge was flowing into her, overwhelming her senses. Alara fell to her knees, clutching the fruit to her chest. The golden glow seeped into her skin, her veins, her very soul. She could feel the orchard's will pressing in, alive and aware, testing her resolve. "Do you understand what you've taken?" The figure from the shadows whispered again, its voice slicing through the chaos. It was no longer just a warning, it was judgment. The ground beneath her cracked, roots twisting upward like serpents, forming a cage. The obsidian tree's hollow pulsed, the golden light spilling outward, illuminating shapes in the mist, hundreds of eyes, watching, waiting. The orchard had awakened fully, and it wanted her to prove herself worthy or be consumed. Visions swirled faster now, flashing images of power, destruction, temptation, and sacrifice. Alara saw herself in countless possible futures, each one shaped by what she did with the fire she now held. Some paths showed glory, others ruin. Every choice carried weight heavier than she had ever imagined. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm paused. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. The orchard held its breath. The fruit glowed brighter than the moon, and the hollow in the obsidian tree opened fully, revealing a staircase spiraling downward into darkness. It was an invitation and a test. The shadowed figure stepped closer, its eyes molten gold. Knowledge is fire. Power is a burden. The orchard tests those who dare to wield it. Will you take the next step, or let it consume you here? Alara's hand hovered over the threshold of the staircase. Her body trembled. Every instinct screamed danger. Every fiber of curiosity urged her forward. She knew that stepping down would change everything: her life, the orchard, and perhaps the very balance of the world outside these trees. She took a deep breath, tightened her grip on the fruit, and stepped into the darkness. The orchard exhaled. The shadows surged, and the secrets waited. Alara's foot touched the first step, and darkness swallowed her. The golden fruit pulsed, lighting the spiral faintly, casting long, writhing shadows along the walls of gnarled wood. Each step downward made the air heavier, thick with the scent of earth, decay, and something sweeter like memory and magic intertwined. The staircase seemed endless. With every turn, she glimpsed fragments of the orchard above the twisted branches, the spectral figures, the obsidian tree shrinking into a distant, glowing memory. Whispers followed her, some pleading, some mocking, twisting around her mind, testing her resolve. Then, a low hum began, resonating from beneath the steps. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural. It was alive, pulsing in rhythm with the fire in her hand. Alara realized with a chill that the orchard's heart was below, waiting to judge her, to see if she could bear its knowledge. At the bottom of the staircase, the air opened into a vast cavern beneath the orchard. Roots hung from the ceiling, like chandeliers, dripping golden sap that glimmered like molten sunlight. In the center stood a pool, black as obsidian, yet rippling with golden veins. The fire in her pocket hummed louder, as if drawn to it. A figure rose from the pool, a being made entirely of shadow and light, its form shifting constantly, sometimes human, sometimes tree, sometimes something indescribable. Its eyes, too, molten stars fixed on her. "So you have come," it said, voice deep and layered, echoing as though from many mouths at once. "You've taken the fire, but do you know what it demands?" Alara swallowed hard. I don't know, but I have to try. The being's form rippled, branches growing from its shoulders, roots twisting around its limbs. The orchard gives knowledge freely to none. Those who take without understanding are devoured by their own curiosity. But perhaps you can be different. The pool shimmered. In its depths, Elara saw visions of her own life past, present, and countless possible futures, all intertwined with the orchard. Each choice she had made led her here. The fire pulsed urgently, almost impatiently, and she realized it was more than knowledge, it was the key, the spark to unlock the orchard's deepest secret. Step forward, grasp the pool, and see the truth, the being whispered. But beware, the orchard's memory is infinite. Once you know it, it cannot be unlearned. Elara's heart pounded. Fear and curiosity clashed in her chest. She lifted the golden fire higher, feeling its warmth spread through her. The shadows of the cavern twisted closer, urging, warning, daring her. 1 step, 2 steps, and then she reached the edge of the pool. The golden veins swirled faster, calling her name, promising revelation, and perhaps damnation. The orchard waited, silent but alive, holding its breath as she lowered the fire toward the surface. Elara's fingers trembled as she lowered the golden fire toward the obsidian pool. The cavern seemed to inhale, a living entity stretching its roots and branches toward her, curious, cautious, and patient. The air was heavy, saturated with the scent of earth, sap, and a faint sweetness that reminded her of forgotten childhood memories she couldn't quite place. The whispers of the orchard intensified, no longer distant voices but a chorus, layered with emotion, pleading, mocking, warning, enticing. She could see herself reflected in the pool, yet her reflection was wrong. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, matching the fire she held, and her shadow moved independently, writhing, stretching, sometimes lagging behind her own movements. It was as though the orchard itself were testing her, studying her, trying to understand whether she was worthy of what she sought. The fire pulsed hotter, and Elara felt its warmth creeping into her veins, spreading like molten light. Every heartbeat brought visions, small at first, flashes of the orchards past the arrival of the first fire, travelers lost, fruits stolen, promises broken. Each vision stabbed her mind with knowledge she hadn't asked for, but her curiosity flared, unstoppable, driving her closer. "Do you feel it?" the shadowed figure asked, emerging fully from the pool now, limbs shifting like smoke and branches, eyes molten gold, piercing through her very soul. "The orchard remembers everything. It sees through time itself. It knows all who touch its fruit. You think you understand fire, but you know nothing of its price." Elara swallowed hard. I want to know," she said, voice shaking, though a strange clarity had begun to settle in her chest. The orchard's whispers harmonized with her heartbeat now, pulsing in rhythm. With the fire she held, she realized she could no longer separate herself from the orchard. She was part of it now, and it part of her. The cavern trembled. Roots lifted from the ground like living serpents, circling her legs, arms, and torso, but they did not harm her. Instead, they seemed to guide, urging her to move forward. The obsidian pool shimmered, veins of molten gold swirling faster, forming shapes that were almost human, almost animal, almost memory. Faces of those who had come before her flickered in the water, whispering warnings she could not fully hear. Elara knelt beside the pool, her reflection merging with the swirling light. She could see possibilities endless, twisting, sometimes horrifying. A future in which she returned to the world above, burning with forbidden knowledge, forever changed. Another where the orchard consumed her entirely, leaving nothing but a shadow that wandered among the trees for eternity. And another, fleetingly, where she became a guardian herself, bound to the orchard, guiding others like the shadowed figure before her. "The orchard's fire is not merely knowledge," the being whispered, voice echoing through the roots, walls, and ceiling. "It is memory, it is power, it is truth. But every truth comes at a cost, and every memory you take becomes yours to carry. Are you willing to bear the weight?" Her fingers hovered over the pool, the golden fire quivering with impatience. The air shimmered around her, vibrating with energy, whispering in a language she felt more than understood. She felt the orchard breathing beneath her hands, alive in a way that went beyond any earthly life, older than the oldest trees, deeper than the darkest soil, infinite in patience, infinite in memory. With a trembling breath, she placed the fire on the pool's surface. The moment it touched the water, the cavern erupted. Golden light exploded outward, illuminating every root, every twisted trunk, every hidden shadow. The spectral figures of lost travelers screamed not with sound, but with the pressure of presence, pressing into her mind, demanding recognition. Their faces were agonized, twisted in fear, longing, and memory, merging into one vast awareness. Visions poured into her mind, unstoppable. She saw the orchard's creation, seeds carried by forgotten winds, the first traveler to touch the fire, the original guardian who had bound the orchard to the earth. She saw every betrayal, every theft, every moment when a soul had been claimed by curiosity. She felt centuries of fire and shadow coursing through her consciousness. Every truth, every memory, every hidden desire of every being who had ever walked beneath the orchard's branches became hers. Her knees buckled under the weight. The fire burned not her flesh, but her mind, stretching it, expanding it, fracturing it. Yet in that overwhelming clarity, she saw a pattern and order hidden beneath chaos, a truth that connected the orchard, the fire, and herself in a single, unbreakable thread. She understood now why the orchard had been guarded, why the fruit had been forbidden. Knowledge was not given, it was earned, tested, survived. The shadowed figure stepped closer. Its eyes blazed molten gold, reflecting every fragment of memory she now carried. "You have taken the first step," it said, "but the orchard never gives without taking. Are you ready for the cost?" Alara lifted her gaze, feeling the weight of 1,000 lifetimes in her chest, the fire blazing in her hand, the orchard thrumming beneath her. "I am," she whispered. "I will bear it." The cavern trembled again, deeper this time. Roots shifted, water surged, and the shadows surged forward, merging with the golden light. The orchard's heartbeat was now hers. She was no longer merely a visitor. She was a part of its story, and its story was hers. And in that instant, the pool rippled, and the deepest secret of the orchard revealed itself, not in words, not in images, but in a knowledge so complete it reshaped the very essence of who she was. The fire flared, the shadows danced, and Alara felt herself lifted, suspended between understanding and oblivion, between the orchard's past and the infinite possibilities of its future. The orchard had claimed her curiosity, and now it awaited her choice. Beneath the glass tide, Prometheus stood at the edge of the world, where the land dissolved into the sea of glass. The tide shimmered like molten crystal, a frozen reflection of the heavens above, catching fragments of every star that dared to witness its silent ascent. He had come here not by chance, but by the inexorable pull of questions that gnawed at the marrow of his being, questions no fire could answer, no chain could silence. And yet, beneath the glass tide, the universe seemed to wait for him, patient and unblinking, as though it had been holding its breath since the first spark of time. He dipped a hand into the tide, and the surface yielded like water, cold yet curiously alive, humming with a rhythm older than memory. Each ripple was a story, a thought, a sigh from worlds long vanished. Prometheus drew his hand back slowly, beads of liquid light slipping through his fingers. "Everything is fragile," he whispered to the wind that carried no sound. "Even eternity is glass." Around him, the tide murmured secrets in a language of reflection. For those who dared to listen, it spoke in paradox. The further one reached for knowledge, the more the world refracted beneath their touch. Prometheus remembered the fire he had stolen, the blaze he had offered to humanity. He had given warmth and light, but also pain, liberation and torment in equal measure. Was this tide, this glimmering expanse, the consequence of that act, or was it merely another mirror, showing him that wisdom always comes with a price, even when the cost is unseen? He stepped forward, and the glass tide stretched beneath him like a path of liquid diamonds. With each footfall, he felt the weight of eons pressing upon his shoulders, the collective size of 1,000 civilizations that had reached too far. In the tide, he saw a reflection of himself, chained, yet unbroken, punished, yet relentless. His shadow merged with the reflections of unseen constellations, a reminder that even Prometheus, the eternal rebel, was a part of something far larger than his own defiance. A sudden tremor ran through the tide, and images flickered beneath its surface. Cities built of light rose and fell. Creatures of smoke and memory scuttled across the mirrored plains. Voices of the ancients whispered in tongues that no living being could speak. Each vision was a test, a riddle, a parable, and Prometheus understood that this was the lesson of the tide. Comprehension was not merely an act of seeing, but of feeling, of surrendering to the ebb and flow of truth. He knelt, pressing his forehead to the glass. The world beneath trembled, as if responding to the touch of a god who had once defied the cosmos itself. In that moment, he saw a city of fire, suspended in a void of thought, and in its heart, a lone figure reached out not for escape, but for understanding. Prometheus recognized the gesture. It was his own, mirrored in 1,000 lifetimes. A reminder that the act of giving, of stealing, of daring, was eternal. Knowledge, he murmured, is a tide. You cannot hold it, only walk beneath it. As the tide rippled and shimmered, a deeper truth revealed itself. Prometheus realized that the glass was not a barrier, nor was it a prison. It was a lens, a metaphor, a parable made manifest. Every reflection carried the weight of consequence, the shadow of choice, the flicker of hope. And in that realization, he felt not despair, but the strange, luminous serenity of one who has touched eternity and returned unscathed, not because he was untouched, but because he had learned to move with the tide rather than against it. And so he walked, beneath the glass tide, a solitary figure among infinite reflections. The tide shimmered and whispered, and for the first time, Prometheus did not resist. He did not seek to change it, to break it, or to command it. He simply listened, and in listening, he began to understand that the fire he had given to the world, the chains he had borne, the choices he had made, all were but ripples in a vast, luminous ocean, one that stretched beneath the glass tide, eternal and patient, waiting for all who dared to step into its depths. Beneath the glass tide, Prometheus was not a thief, nor a martyr, nor a god. He was merely a witness, one who had learned that every act of defiance, every stolen flame, every fleeting spark of courage, became part of the endless reflection, part of the tide itself. And in the mirrored eternity, he found a quiet truth, that even gods are taught by tides, and that even glass, though fragile, can contain infinite light. Prometheus walked on, each step sending ripples across the glass tide, as if the world itself were breathing beneath him. The tide was no longer merely a reflection of the sky. It became a mirror of his own mind. Memories of past defiance floated up like bubbles trapped beneath crystal. He saw himself chained to the mountains, the weight of divine punishment pressing into his shoulders. And yet, in the tide's mirrored surface, he also saw moments of triumph, the first fire he had stolen, the warmth it had brought to trembling hands, the eyes of mortals glimmering with new understanding. It was then he noticed a figure on the horizon, a shape composed of the same glass as the tide. The figure was indistinct, flickering, like a candle flame seen through rain. As Prometheus approached, he realized that it was both familiar and impossible, a child, yet older than time, mortal, yet echoing eternity. The figure spoke without words, a language of light and shadow that resonated directly in Prometheus's mind. You carry fire, it said, but do you know the weight it bears? Prometheus paused, feeling the old ache of chains long removed. I know, he replied, and yet I walk beneath it still. The figure's gaze seemed to pierce the tide itself. Suddenly, the glass beneath their feet fractured, not broken, but opening, like a flower unfolding into infinite layers. From the fissures arose tiny, luminous creatures, delicate as smoke, darting in patterns that resembled constellations. Each one carried a fragment of a story, a truth too fragile to hold, a dream too fleeting to name. Prometheus bent down to follow them with his gaze, realizing that each spark was a parable in motion, a lesson moving in patterns he could almost but not entirely comprehend. These are the ripples, the figure continued, of every choice ever made, every act of courage, every theft, every defiance, every surrender. They all flow beneath the glass tide. Prometheus watched as the creatures danced, weaving their stories into the tide itself. And then he saw a darker current. Beneath the shimmer of light, shadows that bent and twisted, echoing pain, loss, and regret. They were the weight of consequence, the counterbalance to every spark of hope. To walk beneath the glass tide was not merely to witness eternity, it was to bear it. He knelt again, pressing his hand into the surface. The tide welcomed him, cold yet alive, whispering in a voice older than the first star. "Do you understand? Now?" It seemed to ask. "Do you see the cost of fire, of knowledge, of daring?" Prometheus's reflection wavered. He saw a man chained, a man walking freely, a man who had given everything and taken nothing. And in that moment, he understood that the tide was not punishment, nor reward. It was a teacher. Every ripple was a lesson, every reflection a question. To walk beneath it was not to conquer, but to learn to let the tide move through him, to see without claiming, to witness without destroying. The figure of light, now nearer, reached out. Their hand did not touch his, yet Prometheus felt a connection, a silent acknowledgement that every being, god or mortal, flame-bearer or thief, shared the same tide. In that shared reflection, he glimpsed a vision of humanity itself, fragile, luminous, forever reaching, forever learning. He rose, stepping forward with renewed purpose. The tide stretched endlessly, and beneath it, infinite reflections of himself and others shimmered and danced. And Prometheus realized that the fire he had given to mortals was not merely warmth or light, it was a tide of possibility, fragile, yet infinite, demanding courage, patience, and the willingness to walk beneath it without fear. Beneath the glass tide, Prometheus smiled, not because he had conquered it, nor because he had understood it fully, but because he had entered into its rhythm. The tide whispered, a melody of echoes and refracted light, and he knew, to be a witness was itself a form of eternity. And as the tide stretched toward horizons unseen, Prometheus walked onward, carrying fire, bearing lessons, and listening to the silent parables that flowed beneath the glass, learning the truth that every reflection, every ripple, and every fragment of light was both gift and teacher, and that even a god could learn from the tide. Prometheus walked steadily, each footfall sending gentle waves across the glass tide. The horizon rippled like liquid silver, folding inward, revealing figures that seemed carved from memory itself. They were not fully human, nor fully divine, but echoes of choices made, lives touched, fires stolen, and truths withheld. The first figure approached a mortal woman, draped in flowing garments of shadow and light, holding a broken flame in her hands. "Prometheus," she said, her voice a harmony of hope and sorrow, "I have wandered seeking fire, yet every spark I claimed burned something else. Tell me, what is fire if not a burden?" Prometheus knelt beside her, seeing in her reflection the child, the thief, the giver he once was. "Fire is neither burden nor gift," he said softly. "It is a mirror of intention. It reveals what you already carry. The question is not what fire will do, but what you will do with it." She handed him the broken flame. It shimmered like liquid amber, fragile and fleeting. He touched it gently, feeling the heat and weight of every soul it had ever touched. "Then to give is to risk," he said. "To bear it is to witness, but to withhold, to fear it, is to extinguish possibility." The woman nodded, dissolving into ripples of silver, leaving behind only the warmth of understanding. A second figure emerged, a god with eyes like molten starlight, wings folded yet glimmering with endless constellations. "Prometheus," the god intoned, "you defy the order of heavens and earth. You carry fire meant for gods, yet you preach humility. Explain this paradox." Prometheus met the gaze without fear. "The paradox is not in defiance," he said, "but in the purpose behind it. Fire was stolen to awaken, not dominate. Knowledge was taken to illuminate, not enslave. Power without wisdom is chaos. To walk beneath the tide is to honor both flame and shadow, both mortal and divine. The god's wings shimmered, scattering stars across the glass tide. Then perhaps defiance itself is not sin, but a path, it whispered, folding into the currents. Further along, a child appeared barefoot, laughing, carrying a tiny lantern of pure crystal. Prometheus, why do you carry fire that could burn the world? The child asked. Prometheus crouched to meet the child's eyes. Because fire is not just destruction, he said. It warms, it lights, it teaches, but it only becomes what you make of it. You may fear it, you may love it, but never ignore it. The child nodded, running ahead, leaving sparks in its wake that became miniature stars on the glass tide. A fourth figure arose, a man cloaked entirely in mirrors, reflecting every angle of Prometheus's face. Do you see yourself? The man asked. Or only what you wish to see? Prometheus gazed into the mirrored cloak. I see both, he said. The chained, the defiant, the teacher, the thief. To see only one is to live in illusion. To see all and accept all is the courage the tide demands. The mirrored man smiled, folding into infinity, leaving Prometheus alone with the soft hum of the tide and the endless horizon. Finally, a figure of glass, almost imperceptible, rose from beneath the surface, a being composed entirely of reflections and ripples. Prometheus, it said, voice like water and wind combined. All these parables, all these echoes, are they yours, or are they the tides? Prometheus gazed at his own reflection within the figure. They are neither solely mine nor solely the tides, he said. They exist where choice meets consequence, where courage meets fear. I walk among them, shaped by them, bearing their truths. I am fire, yet fire is not mine. I am witness, yet witness is not all I am. I am part of the tide, and the tide is part of me. The tide shimmered, folding all the figures and reflections into a single, infinite pattern of light and shadow. Prometheus stepped forward, each stride sending ripples of stories outward, each ripple carrying courage, consequence, and reflection across eternity. And as he walked, he realized that beneath the glass tide, all beings mortal, divine, and echo alike were connected by the same currents. Every choice, every flame, every act of courage or restraint flowed into the endless glass, leaving an imprint that could never be erased. Prometheus raised his arms, allowing the tide to embrace him fully. Fire, reflection, shadow, and light converged, revealing a truth beyond punishment, beyond defiance, beyond theft. To bear fire is not to rule, not to teach, not to dominate. It is to witness, to endure, and to walk courageously within the endless flow of eternity. Step by step, ripple by ripple, he continued beneath the glass tide, no longer alone, yet entirely self-contained, carrying stories, choices, and light within him, the eternal witness to the infinite parables of the world. As Prometheus walked, the glass tide rippled with a new intensity. From the liquid horizon, shapes emerged, mirrors not of ordinary reflection, but of lives unlived, paths never taken, and choices postponed. Each mirrored figure moved with its own rhythm, a silent echo of what might have been. The first mirror showed Prometheus chained to the heavens, never daring to steal fire. His eyes were hollow, his body rigid, yet there was no shame, only the unrelenting weight of inaction. You might have been this, the tide whispered, if fear had held you. But even this life has its lessons. Prometheus studied the figure. In this path, he said softly, no flame is stolen, yet no warmth is shared. Knowledge remains locked, untouched, unused. I see the cost of hesitation, and the cost of restraint is still a burden, though silent. Another mirror emerged, a Prometheus who took fire not for humans, but for himself, hoarding it, reveling in the defiance alone. He glowed with light, yet his eyes were lonely, his chest heavy with pride and isolation. And this path, the tide murmured, is the fire of arrogance. To hold without giving is to burn only oneself. Prometheus nodded, Even fire is not immune to solitude. To give, even imperfectly, is to share the weight. To hoard is to starve one's own heart. A third mirror shimmered, a Prometheus who gave fire recklessly, igniting chaos, war, and ruin. He laughed as cities burned, unaware of consequences, drunk on the thrill of power. The glass tide shuddered, reflecting screams and ashes within its depths. You could have been this, the tide said, a destroyer in the guise of a giver. Knowledge without wisdom is catastrophe. Prometheus's gaze was steady. Yes, even my noble acts could be folly if not tempered by foresight. To give is not enough. One must witness the impact, bear the weight, and choose carefully. A fourth mirror appeared, a Prometheus who walked quietly, carrying fire, knowledge, and courage with humility. No chains, no applause, no glory, but a steady, deliberate light that touched lives silently, shaping the world subtly yet profoundly. This path, the tide intoned, is rare. Courage without spectacle, wisdom without arrogance. You could have walked it fully, unseen, yet eternal in your influence. Prometheus smiled faintly. This is the path I have chosen, though my life has not been quiet. I walk openly, bearing consequences, learning, teaching, witnessing. Flame and shadow intertwine in my hands. I am flawed, yet I endure. Finally, a mirror surfaced, fractured and infinite, reflecting countless versions of Prometheus simultaneously, each a composite of choice, consequence, courage, and fear. Some chained, some free, some laughing, some mourning, all walking beneath a tide of glass, each carrying a spark of light. The tide rippled across the mirrors. All of these are you, it whispered. All of these could have been, might yet be. The fire is constant, but the bearer is infinite. Walk fully, Prometheus. Accept every possibility, and every lesson hidden beneath the surface. Prometheus stepped into the fractured reflection, and as he did, every mirror converged. The chains, the flames, the laughter, the tears all merged into a single radiant pulse. He felt the weight of countless lives, infinite choices, and eternal courage compress into his chest. Yet it did not crush him. Instead, it expanded him, revealing the essence of fire. It is not owned, not commanded, not hoarded. It is lived. It is witnessed. It is endured. The glass tide shimmered, stretching into infinity. Every ripple was a story. Every reflection, a life. Every spark, a choice. Prometheus walked forward, and now, fully aware of every possibility, every path, he carried not just fire, but the entirety of its meaning: courage, consequence, humility, witness, and endurance. Beneath the glass tide, Prometheus realized, eternity is not a singular path, nor a final destination. It is a convergence of choices, a river of mirrored possibilities. To walk courageously, to bear fire responsibly, and to witness fully is to live in harmony with the tide itself. Step by step, ripple by ripple, Prometheus continued, a single flame amid infinite reflections, fully present in the eternal flow beneath the glass tide.